The following is an 18PR production. From deep in the heart of West Texas.
And everybody knows Studio A or Ground Zero is at 18PR, and everyone knows 18PR is out yonder.
It's a one-of-a-kind, worldwide transmission. Heroes and Heroines File. The Free-Range Talent File. The Unexplained Files. The Ain't Love Grand File. Michael Shawn's Campfire.
And the Free-Range Texan News Network.
A clear and present detour on the road of everyday life.
You're listening to the Free Range Texan podcast.
With our host, who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn.
Episode 24 of the Free Range Texan podcast. First of all, it is really good to be joining up with you again. We've got a lot of things that have happened, a lot of things that have come up. We've been busy in our production department. First of all, I may want to point out to you that this podcast is an extended play version and that it runs a bit longer than usual, but we have a lot of information to cover. All the usual lineup of cast and crew are in place, not to mention Foxy the Wonder Dog. Our security continues to be at its highest level. That's right, her middle name is Sickum. What a crew we got here at the 18PR Studios, Studio A. This is the big one, folks. This is where the high-budget production all takes place here. Finally, I have another announcement that we should get out of the way first. Tom Selleck will not be on today's show. Before we get started, though, let me remind you, if you're thinking about producing a podcast of any type, no matter where you are, if you can hear this podcast, 18PR can work for you. There are so many facets to a podcast, or not, depending on what the podcaster has in mind. But if you'd like for 18PR to come alongside and help you get your podcast underway, 18PR produces, among other things, the Free Range Texan podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the folks at 18PR, go figure. They got a website. You go to freerangetexan.net, and there's a button right there that'll take you right through the front door over at 18PR. And remember, feedback of any type can be sent to info@freerangetexan.net. Or better yet, go to freerangetexan.net and find out all about all the goings-on here. Harriett McFeely, our special guest from the Crossroads of America Center for Research on Bigfoot. And by the time we get down the way towards the end of our podcast, I'm going to divulge some personal information around the campfire. And if you've ever wondered, who is this Michael Shawn guy? I'll be revealing quite a bit coming up around the campfire at the end of this program. Michael Shawn's Campfire, we'll expect you there. It's a Free Range Texan podcast. Let's saddle up and get ready to ride. Have digital microphone, will travel. Dress code required. Best if combined with smoked meats. Yeah, like no caps with bills on the back. Yeah, where do you find those anyway? Officially designated as a spectacular use of your time consuming addictive audio. You're listening to the Free Range Texan podcast. And now, once again, it's time for another free-range Texan Unexplained File. Our guest today on the Free Range Texan is Harriett McFeely.
Hello, Michael.
Harriett, I appreciate you taking some time and talking with us a little bit here. Folks, so that you will know, Harriett has the Bigfoot Crossroads of America Museum and Research Center, and she lives in, of all places, Nebraska. Harriett, when did you first become aware of these Bigfoot creatures in your neck of the woods?
Actually, it was only about 3 or 4 years ago. All my life, I thought I was the only person in the entire state of Nebraska that was even faintly interested in Bigfoot. But then I had a conference, and that was really jumping out on a limb. And I thought maybe it would be a miracle if 25 people came, and I ended up with 750. And so from then on, I had a network. I had people I could talk to, and I had lots of people that told me stories, and then I learned where to go. I mean, I was a complete newbie in all of this. I mean, not in my love or research or anything, but that was how I started, and that's what I tried to do, is to teach other people how they can know where to look for Bigfoot, not only in Nebraska, but all over the United States.
There apparently are some areas, though, that the creature known as Bigfoot is more prolific. And I found out from listening to you speak that there's some interesting reasons why, having to do with, for instance, salt. Yes,
that is true. And that's another thing. I did lots of research a few years ago, because the interesting thing to me in Nebraska, we have more Bigfoot sightings around Lincoln, Nebraska, which is the second largest city in Nebraska. And I thought, why would they go there? That's crazy. They should go out to the sandhills by the Black Hills, where there's lots of water and trees and deer for lunch. They go to Lincoln, Nebraska. Yeah, the north edge of Lincoln, but they had 11 mines where they mine salt. And there's still a huge big meadow there that when it rains really heavily, when the rain soaks down into the dirt, the salt comes up. Salt.
Yeah, but connect the dots for us a little bit. What does that have to do with Bigfoot?
Because the Bigfoot need salt to keep their system and their hormones and all of their vitamins and minerals and all of those things in their body. They need salt to keep those things working. And so that's why they went there. They were getting salt that they needed.
So they had have a natural craving for sodium or salt.
And that's true. They do.
But it doesn't account for the fact that there is so little evidence of their existence, yet apparently, according to some that really believe they have had these experiences, they do exist prolifically across the United States. How do you account for the fact that a creature that size and apparently that numerous can remain largely out of sight?
Well, I think it's a whole lot easier than people imagine, because for one thing, a great majority of the time, they're nocturnal animals. So I've always thought, you could probably drive your car within 10 feet of one, and if it was dark, you would never see them. So that's one of the main things. And the other thing I think is, for them, in order to survive, they have got to avoid us. And so I think they are experts of that. That's why they call them tree peekers, because they stand behind the trees and they look at you. And one of the sightings that I had, I would have never, ever, ever seen it because he was behind a tree, but he was kind of, how do I want to say it? He was moving back and forth. and it was the movement that I saw. He was kind of a cinnamon color, and he was a big guy, too. But again, I would have never seen him if he hadn't have moved. And he was swaying back and forth, kind of to a rhythm. And he did that. I watched him for about 10 minutes, and he never moved. He just kept swaying. And I've heard other people think that possibly if they are feeling stress, like if we are out there, that they rock themselves to calm down. So I think it doesn't matter if you're in Nebraska or where you are, because there are so many places for them to hide. There's all kinds of rocks and trees and caves, and around here we've got lots of old abandoned barns and farms, and a lot of people just go park an old RV somewhere.
One of the things that I remember when I first heard you speak, you told a story how, now you correct me at a certain point and you take this story over, but if I remember, the first thing you noticed in the fresh snow around your home was a footprint or two one morning. And then the story goes on from there. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I can. And this is the first time that I really told anybody about Bigfoot showing up around here. But that's true. We live on a little acreage just about a mile from town, and our land is completely surrounded by a shelter belt. So in the morning, in the winter, whenever it snows, first thing I do is look out my windows, and I used to walk down our driveway, which was I'd say about 100 feet, to a little dirt road. And so I would walk down to the road, because then I could look both directions and see how much snow had fallen. And so one morning I walked down, and coming from the field across the road from me, which in the summer, there's corn over there, and also I am completely surrounded by corn. And so anyway, at that time, the corn was cut down. It was only, 8 or 10 inches tall.
Right.
And so I was looking down the road to see how much snow we had. And I saw these huge, big footprints coming across the man's field there, then across the road. Then they went right straight down my driveway for about 100 feet. And then I have a circle drive. So they walked down the circle drive, and my whole driveway is ringed by railroad ties. So they got to the end of the circle, they stepped over the railroad tie, and they kept right on going across my neighbor's backyard and then to another little road that connects. And at the time, I never even considered that it was a Bigfoot. And it made me angry, because we live out in the country, and I went back in the house, and I said to my husband, I said, that really makes me angry that people are out walking around on our property. And so I didn't even think about Bigfoot, because as I thought then, of course, Bigfoot did not live in Nebraska. They were in California. And it never occurred to me that those footprints were like 5 or 6 feet apart, each foot.
If I remember correctly, you... there was some interaction with you and one of these Bigfoot creatures that began to get more and more comfortable coming around your home. Now, do I have this correct?
Yes, I think that is true. And even now, about the only time that I've ever seen footprints, it's always been when we had snow. Because the rest of the time I have a hard rock, gravel driveway, so you never see footprints. So the last time I did see footprints in the snow, and those I went tearing out. I had my pajamas on and my shoes, and that was it. And those footprints were about, I'd say 13 to 14 inches long. And the reason I'm not exactly certain on that is because once they step in the snow, it kind of squishes out a little bit. So it's not exact. But I did measure the length of the stride from their toe to the back of their heel, and it was right on the button, 59 inches. Every single step was about that.
Wow.
And again, And I wonder, I don't know, but I wonder if it could have possibly been the same one, because he walked exactly the same way. He walked from the road straight down my driveway, around my circle drive. He stepped over the railroad ties, and he continued on across my neighbor's backyard. So, I mean, I just wonder. I can't prove it, but I wonder.
Well, what was the situation that occurred, though, that made you realize, aha, these things are real and they're here?
Well, we have so many weird things happen. I have, in my trees, like I said, I have a huge big shelter belt. And I've got a couple structures that I really kind of think that they might have made because they're so unusual. I've got some tree breaks around, and they're up high, and it's not like where the tree break is, the branch is twisted and then it's broken. And that seems to be a pretty good indication of a Bigfoot.
And you don't think this is a weather event or anything like that? It's in other words, it's isolated to just one spot.
Within a mile of my house. And I think the reason I say that I think it is not weather related, is because when the wind breaks a tree, it snaps it. That's it. And it seems to me like when the Bigfoot do it, that branch is twisted around, and then it's broken. So the branch really is still connected. And so when I go out and I see a broken tree like that, or a branch, then I always go and look to the spot where it's broken at. And if it's twisted, I think, aha, maybe that's one of our big friends.
If I remember correctly, you told a story about actually running into this Bigfoot creature there at your home one day. Can you tell me about that?
This was only a year ago, and it was in the daylight. It was about the end of April, and I had a woman that was living in my basement apartment, and she would always take her little dog outdoors on my circle drive. And so she took her dog out, and as she was looking to the end of the drive where he steps over, there was one standing right there. And he was looking at her and the dog, and she was looking at him. And she was absolutely just totally terrified. And she grabbed the dog, and she went running in the house. And just a few minutes after that, I got home because I'd gone on an errand. And she kept saying, Harriet, you'll never guess what happened. Oh, man, oh, boy, you will not believe this. And I kept saying, calm down, just tell me what happened. Anyway, she was telling me that he was standing right at the end of my circle drive. So I went and I got a tape measure, and I had her, and I walked to the end. I had her tell me exactly where he was standing. And so I found that spot, and I kept saying, was he this tall, this tall, this tall? And finally, there was a tree right there, and she said, I know, the top of the tree, the leaves were kind of brushing on the top of the hair on his head. And so I measured that, and it was 7'3". And from there, he continued walking. I mean, he didn't bother her. He didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't throw a rock, didn't do anything. He just stood there and looked at her. But she said that he was kind of a cinnamon brown color, not real dark. And she talked about really wide shoulders. And so then, instead of stepping across my railroad tie, he kept on walking straight, which he came to the other side of the circle. And there was just some light-colored footprints there because it had rained and it was muddy. And so there was a footprint just as he stepped over the other side. But I've known this woman for a lot of years, and I believe her. It was early in the morning also. It was about 6:30 because she goes to work early. And the last thing she always does is take her dog out.
The creatures that we're talking about here, what do you think they primarily eat?
I think they really hit the jackpot when they come to Nebraska, because we have got hundreds and hundreds of deer around here. I mean, just about every couple day or so you can see deer around. And I think that's probably their principal meal. But we also, just in my yard alone, I have got pheasants, I have got wild turkeys, I've got all kinds of rabbits, and I've got possums and raccoons and badgers and a zillion rabbits. And so for me, there's all kinds of things like that. And those things are here year-round. Yes and no, but I also think that they eat all kinds of fruits and vegetables. In fact, we had a speaker that was here at our first conference, and they said that there are over 150 different plants and trees that even we can eat here in the wild year-round, and I never knew that. We've got apples and peaches and strawberries and elderberries and plums. If you go back to the salt, there are lots and lots of salt plants that are edible. There's cattails, and so I think there's lots and lots of things for them to eat here. So I think they have a diet where it's meat and it's also fruits and vegetables. They do like chocolate chip cookies and Ritz crackers.
Who doesn't?
So that doesn't hurt to bribe them.
Now, wait just a minute. Hold it just a minute. Chocolate chip cookies and Ritz crackers.
Yeah.
How do you know that?
Because I put them out and they're always gone. Oh, and the other thing that we do here quite often is I buy jars of peanut butter. And I really like that. When I get a jar, I take the lid off, and on the inside there's like a tinfoil little piece, that goes across.
Right.
I pull the tinfoil off, and then I put the lid back on. I just screw it on, and then I set it out. I've got a couple of trees that have kind of a little Y in the center, so I can set a jar of peanut butter there. And plus I have like a little bird feeder, like where a bird takes a bath. And so I will set a jar of peanut butter there, and sometimes it takes a week or two, and sometimes it takes a month. And that jar will either be completely missing, and then I'll find it clear on the other side of my yard maybe a month later, or sometimes the lid is off the jar, and the inside of that jar is just as clean. You would have thought I put it in the dishwasher.
Well, now, the message here is for lack of a better term, a regular animal that we know of around in all areas of the United States. While we know they would appreciate peanut butter, they are not adept at the amount of intelligence that it takes to open a jar and then consume the contents.
Right, but there's one thing that you forgot, and this is absolutely crucial. When you open a lid, a jar lid, what does it take? You have to have a thumb.
A thumb, yeah.
Yes. You just try it yourself. You cannot open a jar if you just use your four fingers.
I have heard from a number of different people who have continual encounters with Bigfoot creatures, and that's here in Texas. I have heard that there is a level of communication that is hard to describe, that it is not the average thing that you would have with Joe Blow who lives down the road. It is, in fact, something that is a connection of some type where they understand and can also convey messages back to a person who is adept at being in their presence. Can you explain that, or do you know anything about that?
Oh, that is a really hard question. The only thing, well, not the only thing, but the one thing I will say, the very, very first time that I ever was around them. I was invited to go to an all-girl camp out in Colorado. And as I was driving out there, I was wondering, because I had zero experience, I was wondering, am I going to be afraid? And what I found out, I wasn't, because everyone that I had joined had been around them before, and there was never any violence. They'd never tried to hurt us. And since then, I thought, we slept in canvas tents where there's a little dinky, thin piece of canvas between us and them. And you know what? If they wanted to hurt us, it would be so easy. They could do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, like
so
a bear.
Yes.
Right.
Back here. Okay, now, that was the first thing I learned. And so around here, as I began to see signs that they were around, and the trees and the structures and the peanut butter and things like that, I thought, they've never once ever hurt me. And I walk every night when the news is over, I walk my dog around the Circle Drive, and it is dark. And you know what? They could hurt me so easy. They could kill my dog. But they never did. They've never, ever done anything. So that gave me more confidence right there. And when the lady saw him on the driveway, he was never threatening or anything. She was the one that was scared. But it wasn't because of anything he did. And so gradually, as I've gone outdoors at night, I talk to them, which I'm sure other people around here would think, well, she's the crazy Bigfoot lady. But that used to be my name all the time. But anyway, I talk to them, and kind of like they're my friends. I say, hey, you guys, how you doing tonight? Or, it's raining or whatever. But sometimes I think they are around, and even my dog that I have now. Most of the time, I open the door, we walk out, they're always on a leash, and they usually go walk around, and they're smelling around and everything. They stand there, and they have their front feet braced, just like a big bulldog would do. Mm-hmm. And their hair stands on end, the whole length, clear to their backbone, and they just stand there, and they look. And I have to literally drag them down the stairs to get them on the driveway. A few months ago, I had some guys that were doing a lot of vandalism here, and they scared me. Yeah. And so one night, there was a bunch of them that were out on my driveway. There was 5 or 6 guys. And I was really afraid to go out on my own driveway because of those guys.
Well, that's no good.
I walked out. Yeah, I know. I didn't like it either. And I was really hoping the Bigfoot would show up and put the fear of God in those guys. I figured if they had an encounter, they'd never be back.
Never a Bigfoot when you need them.
That's right, and that's exactly what I did. I walked out on the driveway, and my dog was standing there, and I said to the Bigfoot, I said, hey, you guys, I think you're around here a lot. And I said, these guys are scaring me. And I said, would you just take care of me?
Well, I don't mean to be naive here or a simpleton, but then would it be fair to say that the impression you get is Bigfoot understands English?
I think they do. I do. Because when I've been around people that go squatching a lot, I've heard them say that they talk to them. And, I've heard that they can mimic sounds like maybe a parrot does. And I've heard other people say, well, that I have a lot of coyotes around here. And they said that they can, make a sound like a coyote or an owl or different things. And so I'm not sure how much they understand or if they are just mimicking a sound that they've heard repeatedly. I don't know. And I think a lot of it has to do with your tone of voice. I just believe so much animals know if you are going to hurt them or not and how you talk to them. I talk to all these animals. And so I think if it's true of a rabbit or a robin, why wouldn't that be true of a Bigfoot?
Harriett, you have created the Bigfoot Crossroads of America Museum and Research Center. Yes. What do you research at your museum and research center? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, first of all, the first part of the research is really, really simple. And so people started calling me, and they would say, I knew I could tell you this. And they'd tell me about an encounter. And they said, I knew I could tell you this because you wouldn't laugh at me or call me crazy or say I was a liar or a hoaxer. And so then I started hearing all kinds of stories, from people, close by me and around Nebraska. And so that was really, really good. So and also I've had a couple different sheriff's departments that something weird has happened at somebody's, farm or whatever. And I have gone out and investigated and written up a report, and I've actually given it to the sheriff and taken pictures. And of course, a lot of that is only my opinion. It's just things that I see and I question because it's unusual. So I do that.
So now you are officially recognized as a Bigfoot investigator.
Yes, and like I said, most of it's close around here where I live.
Let's take just a moment here as a third party here, a couple of the better stories that are more intriguing.
Yes, but my best story of all just happened about 17 miles from my house. The Platte River runs clear across the whole state of Nebraska. And so that's kind of where I live south of there. And so anyway, it turned out it was our minister's son who was a senior in high school that year. And he and his friend, they both work. They're both responsible kids. I know them. They're not into drugs or alcohol. It's a private lake that is about, I'd say maybe not more than a quarter of a mile from the Platte. And so these two boys went up to this private lake, and they go fishing, and they were going to camp out there overnight. And they went up to this little lake, and it's not very big, and it's kind of a keyhole shape. On one side, it's a sandy beach, and you can walk right across the beach, and you can keep right on going, and you will go into the lake. It's not a drop-off. On the other side of the lake, which is probably, I'd say maybe 50 or 60 feet away, it's a steep hill, and it's you can walk up it, but you have to work at it, and there's trees and bushes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the boys went to the first part of the lake, and fishermen would know this. I don't know what you call it, where you take a fishing line and you put it across the lake, and you leave it there overnight.
Well, they were setting a trot line.
Okay. See, I didn't know what you call it. Well, that's what they did. So they set a line, and they were looking across the lake at the other side, and there were two pairs of red eyes that they could see over there. And these eyes were like blinking. They could see it every time they blinked. And they were saying to each other, oh, look, there's a couple deer over there on the other side of that hill. And so they kind of watched them. And so they looked over, and they're going, hey, look, there's a couple deer over there, too. And they said, he said, well, there's a lot of deer around there, which there are. And so they were just fishing, and around this lake, on the side where the boys were, they have those, it's like a big reel, and it's made of wood, and they put, like, wires around the reel.
I call that a spool.
Yeah, it's a spool. And anyway, so the boys were down there fishing, and they could see these deer eyes, they thought, that was on the opposite side, which was up the hill. And they hadn't been there maybe 20 minutes or a half hour. And all of a sudden, one of these giant spools came hurling off the top of the hill on the other side. It came sailing out right into the middle of that lake, and it hit a splash.
Holy smoke.
It just soaked those kids, the water. It hit the water.
That is not normal deer activity there.
I don't think so. And so it scared them so bad, they decided they were not going to go fishing that night, and they were not especially going to sleep in the back of their pickup. So they picked up all their stuff, except if they were in such a hurry to get out of there, they left their fishing poles and also the trout line. And so that all happened, well, they got there about 10:30, so probably between 10:30 and midnight that night. And in fact, it was almost a year ago right now that it happened. And so they came back to town. It's only 17 miles. They went home. And the next morning, I heard about that, and they called me, and we talked on the phone. Well, the one boy was so scared, he said, I am never going back there, ever, ever, ever. But the other boy, our minister's son, he said, yeah, I'll take you back. So I wanted to go exactly where it was. And there were their two fishing poles. They were still there. But here's the clincher. Right in the middle of that lake was that big spool. It was sitting right there. The water was fairly shallow. It's probably maybe not any more than 2 or 3 feet deep. And that spool is sitting there to this day. I took pictures of that. I was wondering if you could give me some information about these spools. And he said, yes. And we measured it. The spool was 5 feet across, the diameter. And it was about 4 feet tall. And so I said to the man, how do you get these spools here? And he said, they're so heavy, we have to load them up on a bobcat in the bucket, and then we can put them around in these campsites so people can use them.
And I guess your point here is that's the same size spool that was thrown into the middle of the lake.
It was exactly. And the clincher is, I said to that man, how much do one of those spools weigh? And he said they weigh between 350 and 500 pounds.
This red eyes thing,
yes.
I have heard that over and over and over from stories about all different places around the United States. That is always one of the things, if it's after dark, that they will say that the eyes almost glow. I've got a guy down north of Houston, Glenn Gerard, who has got some remarkable tales, but that's one thing that he points out. He says it's unmistakable when you see those red eyes in the forest at night. It's like they don't even try to conceal that. You're definitely being watched. And I imagine your days are full there at the Bigfoot Crossroads of America Museum and Research Center. Do you have a website that you would like to mention at this point?
Yes, if they just type that, what you just said, in the Bigfoot Crossroads of America, there's a couple websites, and then I also have a Facebook that I write in every single morning just about what's going on, or I write all kinds of things, stories and what I'm doing, and I write about Snooksy, my little dog, and, all kinds of things like that. So, yes, you can check that out. And, yes, I do get lots of stories. And I've heard not too long ago that they estimate people are reporting about 2,000 stories a year all over the whole country. And but they say out of every 10 sightings, only one is ever reported because people do not like to be called crazy or a liar or a hoaxer. And somebody told me, he said, well, you just want to be in the National Enquirer magazine. I said, oh, no, I don't think so.
And I guess our point here on the Free Range Texan is it seems to be more than we're willing to ignore. Anymore, because for so long it has just been kept in ignorance because it's not the type of thing that easily fits into your concept of the world around you, and no one wants to change their concept. Harriet, let me tell you what we're going to do. We are in the process now of creating an article about you for the Free Range Texan podcast blog, and we're going to get some more pictures pictures up on that and that sort of thing. Also at freerangetexan.net, we're going to have all of your information available. And the key to that will be on the blog when you go there.
Okay.
So we just want to say thank you very much. And I am certain that we would like to get a report from you from time to time as you continue to uncover these remarkable stories about the creature known as Bigfoot. Bless you, little sister, and thank you for being on our podcast.
Well, and thank you so much. I appreciate it. And if I do have a hot story, you will be the first one to know.
You've been listening to another Free Range Texan Unexplained File. If you would like to get in touch possibly with today's guest, or would like to learn more information about this segment of our Free Range Texan Unexplained File, then go to our website at freerangetexan.net. Well, once upon a time, way back in 2018, A-Team PR decided to build the first free-range Texan podcast.
Right, well, bring the show band in and put them right back over there. It's a mariachi band. Okay, well, fine. What do you mean selling didn't return our call? A campfire at the beginning of the program? No. Move the campfire to the end of the show.
Well, now just look at what's happened. The Heroes and Heroines File. The Unexplained Files. The Free Range Talent File. The Travelin' Texas File. The Ain't Love Grand File. Our Free Range Texan website. The Free Range Texan House of Treasures. The Free Range Texan blog. The Free Range Texan listener posse. The Free Range Texan YouTube channel. Free Range Texan Facebook page. And now, the Free Range Texan News Network. And the place to find it all is at freerangetexan.net.
So saddle up, my friends. We're riding in the place where it all started. The Free Range Texan Podcast.
Hit 'em up, move 'em out. I'm Michael Shawn. Welcome to the Campfire. Wow, look at those stars. Whenever I see a night like this, I always think of my old friend Ben. Ben Faulkner was a friend of mine. From the spring of '74 till just the other day. Our relationship was different from anyone I ever knew back in the day. Sometimes an uncle. Sometimes a teacher. Sometimes a student, and always a friend. Now, Ben T wasn't perfect. But honestly, partners, I wouldn't change a thing about my old friend. Folks that really knew Ben Faulkner knew the next thing for a fact. You see, you never had to wonder the location of his heart. It was beating for his family, and that's a fact. I rode trail with Ben from the Mexican Chihuahuan Desert to the logging trails of the Arkansas mountains. More campfires under the stars than I can remember, and more adventures than I care to tell. Besides, he was always the self-appointed historian, the great teller of stories. I remember far out in the Big Bend, in a vast desert wilderness back in the summer of '74. A cloudburst came from out of nowhere. The desert floor became treacherous. I made it to the rocks, but my motorcycle didn't. Ben rode in and extended his arm. I slung onto the back of the motorcycle and up through the gullies, down through the breaks, and across the desert we rode, back to base camp. Later that evening, he looked at me and said, "We'll get your motorcycle." And 3 days later, we did. That's a whole nother story. So forgive me, amigos, for carrying on for a spell. But you see, if Ben were here, he'd be the one jawing, and I'd just be grinning while Ben would tell. Then one day, some years back, purely on his own, he found a gal named Donna, a beautiful lady with her own stories to tell. Ben's rough edges got polished, and he finally had a home to spend his days, loving his family. In those final years, there was a continuing line of heartbreaking moments for Ben. But Donna just loved him through them all. And me? I rode some rough trails during the same time. Ben and I would talk now and then, usually because he reached out to me. Amigos, it's a funny thing. Whenever I heard old Ben's voice, we would talk like no time had passed at all. Like it was all only yesterday. Through these last years, I often think of the things I learned from Ben. Things he taught me as we rode life's trails together. He taught me about how to measure the importance of a man or woman. He taught me the fine art of doing rescues. And he always showed me that there are more important things than money. But they're not often what you'd think. And when it's all said and done, it's really just all about family. I still drink my coffee at sunrise, and my trails still can be a little bit tricky, and my days can be thirsty and hot. But a sunset on the Chizos Mountains still makes my heart sing. And I think of my old friend Ben and the things he taught me, such as life is worth living. Never shy away from the road less traveled. And when it's all said and done, remember, family is the only thing that really matters. He never told me anything about these things. He just lived it. I'll do my best to look after things here. Besides, I'm sure, like always, we'll be meeting up down the way. I'm Michael Shawn. See you next time at the campfire. Adios, my friends. Have I told you all lately what a pleasure it is to do this podcast? That closes the gate on this one, episode 24. Thank you, Harriett McFeely, for being our special guest. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for letting me share my heart about my old friend, Ben Faulkner. You'd have liked him. Thank you to the folks over at 18PR. Once again, their support is vital to this podcast. And as for you, Foxy, the Wonder Dog, go get in the pickup. A couple of weeks from now, we'll be riding together again. We are a bi-weekly podcast. Thanks a million, and tell a friend, won't you? Our numbers are increasing. You're the reasons why, and we thank you. We are humbled by that. And it's like those farmers and ranchers tell us around here on the South Plains. They say words that soak into your ears are whispered, not yelled. And I heard one say the other day that meanness don't just happen overnight. Forgive your enemies. It messes with their heads. Oh, take 'em home, sweetie pie.
Thank y'all for listening to the Free Range Texan podcast, produced at A-Team-PR Studios out yonder in West Texas, with our host, who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn. Feedback or submissions to our program can be submitted on our website, freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net. This is Sweetie Pie on behalf of Michael Shawn and the crew here in Studio A, where we're all looking forward to spending time with you on our next bi-weekly episode of the Free Range Texan podcast. Y'all come back now. You hear?
This is Free Range Texan Airways, Podcast 1, ready for takeoff.
Podcast 1, you're cleared for takeoff.
Nose up. Check wheels up.
Wheels up.
Reduce flaps. Mr. Sanders, take us to 10,000 feet. Bring us around to a course of south by southwest.
10,000 feet, south by southwest. Aye, Captain.
Engage autopilot.